Welcome to Hire Moment Mastermind. We are delighted to have you here. This is going to be an open Q&A on your toughest job search questions. Some of you might have joined us for our inaugural meeting last week, which is pretty rousing, and we're going to change things up just a little bit today. We'll share that with you just in a moment, but it very much is a chance for you to get your questions posed to myself and our guests today to see if we can help you out with a few more tips for your job search. So just to kind of kick things off, we'll do a couple of intros. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Shira Lotzar. I'm an association recruiter. I'm also a career coach and a branding expert. I write resumes and LinkedIn profiles and help people boost their networking and interviewing. I'm also the co-founder and volunteer of a nonprofit program called boomerworks.org for those of you who are age 50 plus and are interested in self-employment. We offer free services to help you get started in that journey. Also would like to introduce our guest experts today, Corliss Jackson, who specializes in federal government resumes, KiKi, who is a video image expert in all things social media. Thanks, KiKi. Hi. And Mike Robinson, who has been a corporate recruiter for the last 15 plus years in government contracting and high tech. He's also starting a coaching business. So the format for today. First of all, please unmute yourself when you're in the main room and post your questions in the chat box. Today, we're going to do things a little differently than last week. We're going to begin with a 3-minute breakout room. Where you're going to get into a very small group of colleagues, let's say 4 or 5, and you guys together are going to identify your group's top question for the chat box. The reason why we're doing this is because not everybody feels safe frankly to ask questions in the chat, and this is a good way, I think, for people to get their questions out there in a small group setting. Where you can figure out what is the top question that kind of relates to a large group of people, right? So because everybody's questions are very unique, we want to try to find questions that relate to the largest group. Today, we have people from every sector imaginable, every level, every profession. So we want questions, of course, that relate to a larger group. First, when we get back from the breakouts, we'll be addressing some of the advanced questions. In other words, some of the questions that you posed prior to this meeting in the Google form, and then we'll address the questions that you put in the chat. A recording of this session will be posted here, purposefulhire.com/hire moment mastermind. And to give you kind of a little bit of advance notice, next week for this call at 10 o'clock, we're going to be offering a 15-minute speed networking breakout session where you'll get back into groups and you're going to be able to share your job search with each other, offer leads, encouragement, connections, that kind of thing. So going forward, it'll be 9:15 to 10, like today, Q&A, and then starting next week, 10 to 10:15 Eastern will be a breakout. So with that, let's go ahead and jump on in with the breakouts, actually. So what I'd like to do is put you all into groups. Okay, and so what'll happen is when you see if you haven't done breakouts before, you're going to see a little white box come up and just hit the join button. And once you hit join, you'll go into your breakouts. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to just go around the room, kind of pop out your questions, and then you want a scribe, one person, to kind of pick the top question, the most generic question that everybody could probably benefit from, and that scribe, please put that question into the chat box, and then hopefully that'll help kick us off. Okay, so here we go.
Seems like everyone got off to their breakout rooms pretty much, except for here.
Pretty much.
And Joe. Hi, Joe.
Yes. Hey, how's it going? So Ed Shira knows me pretty well. I'm actually a blind gentleman, so unfortunately, I don't think I can click that. But is it possible from your end to click me into my group? Is that a possibility?
You know what? We could. It's we're actually going to they're going to be closing up pretty quickly.
Okay.
So if that's okay, I'll just so next week, could you remind me? I'll make sure
Sure.
that I assign you.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's
Thanks
great.
so much.
Yep. All good. All good.
Thanks.
Hello?
Alrighty. So we're all back. We're going to go
Yeah.
ahead and do the some of the advanced questions first. And here is the first one. So the person asked, what are some great niche job search engines? So what I did was it's a little bit of research for you guys and came up with actually quite a list of job search engines that I think are going to be kind of helpful for you. There's so many job boards out there. I'm going to put this here in the chat box. All right, so if you want to grab this, these are lists that have, you know, the 100 best job boards and the 50 best job boards and niche job boards all over the place in every possible sector. But I did want to highlight something before you grab this, and I think Mike, you may want to chime in here as well. You know, job boards, there's sort of a myth about them because people think, oh, let me post my resume on the job board or answer a job posting from a job board and I'm going to get a job. Well, actually, it's not really the case. Job boards are one of the least effective methods for getting a job. I mean, by far. In fact, if you were going to spend any time on job boards, I'd spend maximum 10% of your job search. I think we could probably all say in unison, what is the best way to get a job? Networking, right? You've heard it before. I'll say it again. This is the absolute way. People do business and people hire people they know, like, and trust. When you can get referred into a job, there's absolutely nothing like it. And I'd like to actually give you a couple of examples actually related to LinkedIn. And this just happened in the last 48 hours. And this, I thought the timing was perfect. I'm so excited to share this with you. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a career coach. So I work with a lot of job seekers. And one of them, I'll call her Sally. She reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, and I get this kind of question a lot, and you guys might too. She says, hey, Shira, she says, I want to apply for a job at XYZ nonprofit, right? And she says, do you know anybody there? Pretty normal question. So I go on LinkedIn, and as it turns out, the nonprofit she was talking about was a local chapter of a national group. So when I did my LinkedIn research, I happened to know somebody at the national organization. So I wrote my national contact, I'll call her Janice. And I said, hey, Janice, I've got this colleague, Sally, and she's interested in this job with the local group. I said, Janice, do you know anybody over there where you can pass her resume on? She says, absolutely. So she sends it over. Janice writes me back the next day. She says, you're in luck. She says, that hiring manager just wrote me and said that she's just finishing up her interviews and she's happy to slide Sally into the mix. I got a note from Sally yesterday. She got the job.
Wow.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
She got the job. Okay. I am telling you, and she didn't even apply. I just did it for her.
Right.
Okay.
That's awesome. That's a really great thing.
It is such an amazing. It's such an amazing story. Yeah, and I just want to encourage you guys that the LinkedIn is one of the most powerful networking tools out there, and we could do a whole session. In fact, I often do LinkedIn trainings for this reason.
What if you choose not to do LinkedIn because you don't do social media because of past bad experience? I choose not to do LinkedIn.
Okay, so I'll just quickly address this. And this is a whole other conversation, right? So unfortunately, we can't do a deep dive in this. But here's what I will say, Ellen. Professionally speaking, and this is going to sound very overdramatic, but it's not overdramatic. Professionally speaking, if you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist. And what I mean by that is that employers, recruiters are looking for people on LinkedIn. This is how most people do search. The difference between LinkedIn and every other social media platform is that LinkedIn is the only professional networking platform. Every other social media platform that people kind of stay away from because it's personal and too personal, there's a firewall here. In fact, so much of a firewall that when people post personal items on LinkedIn, oftentimes the community will push back and say, no, this is not the platform for that. Please use Facebook. Please use Instagram. So all I can share with you is that I would ask you to just strongly reconsider getting on LinkedIn, to actually have a professional profile, to have a brand out there, because people want to find you. They need to know who you are. They need to know your background, and they need to know your value proposition. So speaking of LinkedIn, I'm gonna share one more story. Again, all happened in the last 48 hours, where I had a coaching client, and this individual was actually early career. I work with early careers sometimes. And she was a psychology major, and for some reason after graduation, she decided that she wanted to get into web development. Okay, like had nothing to do with psych, but that's what she wanted to do. She took a class in it in what's called UI, UX design. Anyway, she decided that one of the things that she was interested in specifically is web accessibility, right? So creating accessible design for people with disabilities. So we're doing some coaching, and I said to her, I said, look, one of the best ways you can get yourself known is to go ahead and write a thought leadership article and post it on LinkedIn. Write it about web accessibility, your passion for it, your interest in it, ideas, thoughts, right? She did. She posts it, and quickly she started getting noticed, and she just wrote me, and this is a while back, this is like even pre-COVID. She wrote me yesterday, and she said, Shira, she says, I got a job. And she says, I got the job because I posted on LinkedIn, people started finding me, and I didn't even have to apply for jobs. She says, all of these web companies started coming after me because of what I wrote. So what you can do is in LinkedIn, on your homepage, and I'm just going to do a very quick screen share with you, and you can see how easy this is to do. Where you can go ahead and start writing articles. And right here on your homepage, all of our homepages look very much like this. You can go right here where it says write an article. Tap on the write an article, and this is LinkedIn's blogging section. You just post a picture, put your headline in, write your copy, hit publish, and then it will go to your community, and you can always access it again. And if you do that, and if you write something compelling about your career field, about the industry that you serve, something that's unique, something that, especially by the way, if your career changing and you want the world to know, hey, I have a very strong interest in this new area, LinkedIn is an excellent place to let the world know. You can make connections in LinkedIn, you can post on LinkedIn, you can follow other people's blogs, repost other people's blogs, you can get in LinkedIn groups. There's all these different ways to leverage LinkedIn, and I just wanted to underscore it because, again, 48 hours, I had two quick examples. I see them all the time, but I thought this was really important to share with you guys today. Okay, so that was that question. So for question 2, and I actually would love to have Mike chime in on this one before I do. The question is, after going on an interview, I've noticed that the employer reposts the position so that it appears to be a new listing on job websites.
Yes.
Is the employer looking for new applicants, and is this something to be concerned about? Mike, do you want to go ahead and take this before I do?
Sure. So the answer is yes, that could be that they are reposting it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, because technology does things sometimes, and so there may be something that looks like it's just posted and it's just some sort of quirk, or it's delayed, and so I wouldn't read into it too much, because that is pretty rare to repost. But so kind of a tough one to answer, but I mean, there's not much you can do about it either way, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Well, the other thing too is that, and Mike knows this as well, because we've both been recruiters, sometimes employers are trying, even if they have a couple of candidates that are really strong, sometimes the hiring manager says, look, please expand the pool. They want to have enough of a kind of a selection. If they only have 1 or 2 top candidates, even though you think, oh, well, why can't they just move forward with them? Some hiring managers we want 3 candidates or we want 4 candidates. And so sometimes the recruiter has to go back to the well and repost and get additional people to add to the pool. But besides all of that, I think more than anything, understand that if a job is being posted, you have to, and I kind of was alluding to this earlier, look, when the job is posted, there is such competition for that posting. That is now going literally to the entire world. You are now one of dozens, if not even hundreds of applicants. So your chances of even getting that job when going through a posting are very, very slim, right? And so even if they end up reposting, again, I wouldn't put all your eggs into a job that has been posted publicly. You're not that you shouldn't apply or can't apply, it's fine to apply, but I wouldn't spend emotional energy in thinking about that job that you've applied through a job board. Because whether they posted, you never know what's going on behind the scenes of how the recruiter's doing their search. Again, they're casting a very, very wide net. By contrast, when you go through your personal network, your chances of getting hired, are just exponential. Your competition is minimized, and now you are being referred by a trusted source. It has nothing to do with whether or not they post the job. The strength of your reputation is preceding your resume. So that's just a thought for you. Okay, so this third question, how do you structure your LinkedIn profile if you are in one field but trying to transition into another? Big question. It can take a long time. I'll go ahead and jump into this one since I do LinkedIn profiles. This is kind of my wheelhouse. And I would say this, one of the most underutilized areas of a LinkedIn profile is your about section. It used to be called the summary. It's now called about. And the about section, what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just supposed to be a summary of your experience, that kind of 3 or 4 line, I have 25 years of experience doing X, Y, Z in this field and that kind of, This is supposed to be a compelling narrative about who you are as a professional, who you serve, how you serve, why you serve. You have about 300, you have about 2,000 characters to work with, which is about 300 words. And I always recommend writing this profile from the perspective of a value proposition. What are the urgent business problems that you can solve in the world? Now, I just started with a generic concept, and I'm going to shift this now to making a career change. Because whether you are staying in your career lane or whether you're making a shift, you are aspirationally saying to the market, look, this is where I've been, this is where I'm going, this is how I can serve. And I'd like to give you guys a quick story about a kind of a dramatic career shift that I helped somebody make years ago. And I always use this story because it's just so interesting. So the guy's name is Steve. And Steve came to me after 25 years of mortgage banking. Okay, so he was a mortgage banker, and he said, I want to get out of Dodge. I don't want to do mortgage banking anymore. I said, okay, no problem. I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, I have no idea. So we did some coaching, and we figured out that he actually has a passion for a very, very niche area. And that was something called regenerative medicine. I had never heard of it before. Some of you might have. It's basically stem cell therapy that certain niche doctors use to help you regenerate it's like an orthopedic kind of a healing. So how in the world are we going to make a shift from a guy who was a mortgage banker to getting into regenerative medicine? It's not like he's going to go back and become a doctor. So here's what we decided to do. We actually decided to make the pivot, and we used LinkedIn to do it. And we changed what I call his tribe, even though we kept what I call his lane. Here's what I mean by that. I consider a tribe the industry that you serve, and your lane is your occupation or your profession. So you're thinking mortgage banking. Well, here's the thing. In mortgage banking, you know what he had to do every day? He was a salesperson. He was actually in sales. He happened to be in the finance tribe. He was in the finance industry, but he actually was a sales guy. So what we decided to do was position him to do sales on behalf of regenerative medicine medical practices to go recruit patients, to go sell to patients. It's fascinating, right? So we come up with this idea, and then I wrote him, and I'm a copywriter, so this is what I do. I wrote him a narrative, and I'm going to read this to you. So it's just to protect his privacy, but I'm going to read to you what I wrote. And this is, and I told you this backstory because now you'll understand why this was written in this way. Now, this actually is written very much in a narrative style. You don't have to do it this way, but it tells a story. So first of all, in the heading, Okay, when I say the heading, that's right underneath your picture. Here's a heading that you have, I forget how many characters, but you can actually write something decent. Here's what we put. Regenerative Medicine Brand Ambassador, promoting alternative therapies that help orthopedic injuries heal faster. That is his heading, aspirational. And this is what the narrative says. I know what it's like to live with debilitating pain and have great empathy for those who do. During my recovery from a severe back injury, I realized that traditional treatments can take years to provide relief. Though I eventually recuperated, I wish I knew then of an easier path to help me heal faster. Thankfully, I discovered that regenerative procedures such as PRP, platelet lysis, stem cell treatments, and prolotherapy offer people the opportunity to shorten their rehabilitation period by using their own body tissue to help heal injuries naturally. The benefit of regenerative therapies are cumulative, so they have a better chance to avoid surgery. Now my passion is to let the world know that it's possible to live a pain-free life. And then in all caps, why am I making this career shift? And it continues. When I was in the mortgage business, I helped my clients realize their dream of home ownership. While I enjoyed this vocation for 25 years, now my desire is to help people realize a new dream, the possibility of faster healing. Most doctors who provide these treatments could benefit from having a boots-on-the-ground brand ambassador to educate people about these life-changing therapies. I believe that as doctors continue to see positive patient outcomes, insurance companies will begin to recognize the benefit of making these procedures more affordable. I look forward to the day when everyone can have access to these alternative forms of pain relief. And then we got more specific, and then in all caps, about my sales approach. I relate to people with professionalism, honesty, and integrity. I place my clients' needs above my personal gain. I listen more than I speak. I treat every person like they matter because they do. And then finally, the call to action is connect with me if your medical practice could benefit from someone to promote the good work you're doing, or you're living with orthopedic pain and want to be referred to someone who can help. And then we had his email address, okay? So I share that with you because there are ways to actually do a career shift and leverage LinkedIn to write a narrative that tells the world where you're going, all right? So I hope that that helps answer that question. And then we have one more question here. And Mike, I would love for you to help with this one. And Corliss might have something to say as well. And the question is, are there ways to gain experience in the intelligence field without having been in the military in order to work in that field? What type of training or jobs can one get to, what type of training or jobs can give one experience in that field? I'm not sure if Mike, if that's something you've ever encountered, but love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I have actually. So it's tough to break into that, but the thing to know is that they're looking for your analytical skills and your language skills, and if you have any geographic information systems sort of education or training or anything that sort of would translate well into an analyst job. I've seen people that have been social media analysts, and they've looked at all the social media accounts or activity in certain countries and just tried to get a feel for patterns and what people are saying in certain places. And those kind of skills are really what they're looking for, are people that can kind of scan and integrate a lot of information from a lot of different places, and they're problem solvers. And so you don't necessarily need to have experience in Intel to get a job in Intel, because that's sort of the way it works with Intel, right? So you can just kind of focus on those transferable skills, those analytical skills that would be a good fit for what they're looking for. And yeah, that's probably the best way I would approach it, is just show that you're interested in general analyst work.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. And then we'll take this last question, Ellen's question about headhunters, and then we can jump into the chat box. So, I'd like to address just the whole concept of headhunters. I actually happen to be one, and I've been one for 25 years, and so it's kind of my wheelhouse. First, I'd like to explain sort of a little bit of myth and fact about headhunters, what a lot of people aren't aware of, and that is that headhunters don't represent candidates; they represent employers, right? And it's not that the employer headhunters don't work with candidates. Of course, they do. But they're hired by the employer to conduct very, very niche searches. And yes, headhunters they come in different shapes, sizes, and colors. Some have industry verticals and some have career verticals. So for example, I have an industry vertical. I almost exclusively focus on the association industry, association sector. There are others who might focus on the commercial real estate sector or financial services or healthcare or that kind of thing. And some focus on career verticals. So for example, they only place IT professionals or finance professionals or HR professionals, that kind of thing. And they can be a little bit tricky to find if you don't know kind of where to look. But what I would suggest is this. I mean, there are certainly some big firms out there, Russell Reynolds, Korn Ferry, Spencer Stewart, Isaacson Miller. There are some executive search firms, and when I say executive, I mean they only place executives. There are others, and they work on a retained basis, which means that they get paid throughout the search. There are others that are called contingency headhunters or contingency recruiters, and those tend to focus on professional level jobs. So I'd say director on down, and those are kind of sort of spread out all over the place. One of the best things that you could ever do, and this is going to sound a little odd to suggest it this way, but if you're ever looking for a headhunter, or at least to see if you can get on their radar, two things. I would actually talk to HR people in your network. HR people get contacted by headhunters almost every day. Okay, they know the names. So if you have HR people, go ahead and reach out to them. Number two, in LinkedIn, in the search bar, in fact, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, let me just pull it up. In the search bar, in the upper left-hand corner, so right here, right up here, what you can do is you can type in a variety of keywords, and you can type in recruiter. You can type in a phrase executive search consultant or search consultant. You can put in all kinds of keywords in there, and then when you hit enter, so if I said here, just recruiter, which by the way, we'll pull up all kinds of recruiters, not just headhunters, but corporate recruiters, and then I hit the people button. So in my LinkedIn, almost 2 million people come up, which is not unheard of. In fact, here's someone, her title is recruiter, and her company, it says RP Staffing. Well, RP Staffing says to me, that's actually a search firm of some sort. I don't know what they do, but if you were to open her up and you were to go down here and click on RP Staffing, you would see what they say is staffing and recruiting company. And you can go to their website, and you can, figure out what they do. It's not the most elegant way to do this search, but absolutely you can. In fact, the other thing you can do is if you are in a particular field, so for example, you're in financial services, you might say financial recruiter, something like that. So put in an extra keyword to figure out what kind of recruiter you're looking for. So here, financial recruiter, Justin Bradley. Well, Justin Bradley, I happen to know, is a finance accounting search firm. They are a headhunting firm. So this woman, Janie, she calls herself a financial recruiter. That's where she works. Here, another financial recruiter at Baker Tilly Search and Staffing. So because basically every recruiter is going to be on LinkedIn, if you put in the industry, the career vertical or the industry vertical, and put the word recruiter or search consultant next to it, you should be able to find kind of a good swath of them, right? So that is my tip about headhunters. KiKi, do you want to help us go through the chat like you did last time?
Sure. So we have several questions that have been lined up, and I would encourage everyone at this point, if you have a question on your mind and you haven't typed it in, make sure that you get it in, because we have about 15 minutes left in our discussion today. So Pete asks, how widely are niche job boards used? Do they really have unique opportunities not available on LinkedIn, Indeed, etc.? So talk to us about these niche job boards.
Mike, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So I'll just say, one thing that people don't think about with job boards is using Google. Just focus on Google, because Google collects a lot of jobs on a daily basis, and so that's a great place to just start, because it really will include a lot of jobs from various places. So that's a good place to start. Also, Craigslist, Glassdoor are good places. As far as your question, yeah, so you do need to try a few different job boards if you're going to go that route, because they will be limited by who's partnering with them and who's paying to post through their platform. So I would try multiple job boards, and I would also focus on Google.
Yeah, for sure. I'll let that one I'll just let Mike handle that because we got to keep going.
So, okay,
He has a
so
great
we
answer.
had a question that came from the breakout session, and it says, and this is fantastic because I'm very curious about your answer to this too. Do you have any thoughts as to how those that are independent consultants can go about looking for opportunities? And, okay, part two, are there headhunting firms that, to your knowledge, work in this space? So if you're a consultant, are there headhunting firms that actually will hook you up with clients, or does that even exist?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of.
Right.
The headhunting world, yeah, the headhunting world is specifically works with employers to find them, full-time employees. That said, there is a company called Flex Jobs. And there's another one called Flex Professionals. So there are a few firms out there, search firms, whose job it is to find part-time and contractual individuals for employers. That would be the only sort of distinction. Now, they're not saying, hey, we as a search firm are looking for independent contractors per se, because the person would actually come underneath the staffing firm and be hired by the staffing firm. I know it sounds funny. They'd be hired by the staffing firm on a temporary basis, at least if it's a temp agency. If it's not a temp agency, yeah, they would be brokering the deal. The extent to which they're looking for independent contractors, usually not. It's normally people who just want something part-time. That's I'd say a sidebar kind of a thing, but generally speaking, headhunters are not hired by employers to find independence. At least that hasn't been my experience.
All right. So
And I was part of that breakout, and what we were saying is I'm a consultant and I work independently, but I take one contract for 5 to 15 years with one client. So I'm not working part-time. It's a full-time job. There has to be someone that can connect me to a organization or association that can utilize my professional skills. And I mean full-time, but I am independent on a 1099.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. I just don't have any headhunters per se that place people in that kind of long-term contractual situation. Now, in government contracting, which is that's of course where Mike comes from, they of course will hire people on that long-term contract, and that's a model. I'm just not familiar with any headhunters that's per se specialize in that.
all right.
Sorry.
We have a question that came in about how do you know when government is hiring while companies are not at full occupancy during this COVID-19 period?
So Corliss, you want to handle that?
Here I am. Yeah, so the government is full steam ahead right now. Corporate sector has backed up a little bit, I think, and government has COVID dollars. They have programs that need to continue, and they're hiring 99% of their folks virtually. So I work with a very small agency. We had 25 folks in January, and we're now at about 47. So over the last 3 months, we've hired over 30 people. We've done it all virtually. I have met none of them. So government is hiring. It's good to look now because it's coming up on the end of the fiscal year and they're trying to spend their money.
Good news. I think if for those of you who are looking for jobs in that area, that there's money that needs to be spent. So be looking. So here's a good question. And then I think we have one more that's lined up that goes into salary, but how about this? How do you address the preferred qualifications piece that the interview may or may not bring up during the interview, that the interviewer may or may not bring up during the interview?
That's a great question. I'll tackle that, and then Mike, if you want to go ahead and do that as well. So look, if an employer is saying preferred qualifications, 8 times out of 10, they actually mean required. They don't say it, but that's deep down what they would prefer. Okay, and they will usually favor candidates who have that. So if it is not being brought up to you by them, you bring it up. It's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's in sales terms, which remember you're selling yourself. In sales terms, it's overcoming the objection, meaning you have to know what the objection is in order to overcome it. And if they've already put that in that search announcement and say, we prefer this, and they haven't brought it up to say, do you have experience in this? You should bring it up. And you can do that in multiple ways. You can actually go straight in and say, look, I noticed on the search announcement that you mentioned that you prefer this skill or this background or this industry experience or what have you. How strongly are you as an employer focused on that? And I know you said it's preferred, but is it sort of a nice to have? Is it a must have? Tell me about that. Let them just talk to you and say why they think that it's important, or how much they're favoring it. The other thing too is if you don't have the experience, because I'm guessing that's why the question was brought up, but you have exposure to that skill or that industry or that sector or what have you, bring that up too. Say, I know that you're preferring XYZ qualifications. I don't have direct experience. I have indirect experience. I've been studying it. I've learned it. I've been exposed to it, what have you. Because the whole reason why any employer is going to ask for any niche qualifications is because they're trying to minimize their risk in hiring, period. That is why they ask for it, because employers want someone who can slide into home base, right? Who's been there, done that. They would prefer a kind of a lateral move. I'm just telling you, they usually don't want someone who's underqualified or overqualified. They usually want someone who's sort of been there, done that, where the learning curve is going to be minimized, where the person has the skills and abilities and background to do the job really, really quickly. So that's why they often put that there. Mike, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just say it's a really good best practice at the end of an interview. If there's something that the employer is looking for and it just hasn't come up and you haven't had a chance to say it, it's always appropriate to say, I also wanted to add that I do have experience in this, and I noticed you were looking for this in your job description. So it's your interview. It's always appropriate to add something at the end where you're just, letting them know you do have experience in something that they have not brought up.
And by the way, most recruiters and most employers who are not recruiters, like just hiring managers, don't have a lot of interviewing experience. They often don't know what to ask on these interviews. You think they do, they really don't. Even a lot of recruiters sort of wing it. So just because they haven't brought it up doesn't mean it's not important. And oftentimes they'll be actually grateful that you brought it up if they forgot to.
All right, so we have a question about salary, or like salary negotiations. When we start talking about money, everybody gets really serious. And so we need you to be super, super honest. Everybody who can answer this question, whether it's Mike, Corliss, Shira, like, be super real with us. How do you navigate the salary question with headhunters during the screening stage? Like, why do they pretend to be on the candidate side when they're in effect hired by companies to conduct a search? Okay, so how do we talk about this stuff? And are you really on our side? Like, how honest can we be when we are talking with a headhunter?
Right. So big question. We could probably spend the rest of the time talking about those. So understand, well, first of all, a corporate recruiter, meaning somebody who works for the company. So Mike, for example, was a corporate recruiter for BAE and Boeing, right? So he represented the employer. Headhunters represent the employer, but they're actually in a slightly different situation. They're more of a kind of in a sales role. I mention that because Mike, for example, when he was recruiting, when he was doing salary negotiations, he had the employer's budget in mind, right? So it was all about how do we get the best quality for the least price. That is not being pejorative. That is just a business situation. Just like you're trying to get as much as you can, they're trying to pay as little as they can. Mm-hmm. So when you are presenting your salary requirements, your salary expectations, your job is to aim for as high as realistically possible. Because if you ever give a range of two numbers, they will always go for the low one. You need to do some research. You need to do some homework and figure out what is a comfortable, realistic top end of what would make sense for you. You proffer that to them. Then what will happen is when they're going, and if it's in their range, the employer will come back to you at the end, and even if they don't give you what the top of what you're looking for, at least you should be within kind of a range on the upper end. And what the formula that I like to give to people, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but you feel free to write this down. If somebody asks you, what are your salary expectations? Here's a really good formula. I'm seeking a total cash compensation package in the blank range. Now, I say blank range, again, I don't mean two numbers. I mean, put in that blank a top end concept, like I'm seeking a total cash compensation in the $110,000 range. Now, I say range because if they say, look, 110 is a little above our target, we really can only go around 95. Do you have any flexibility? Then you can come back to that statement and say, yeah, as I mentioned, I was kind of in that 110 range, meaning that I do have flexibility. Let's talk about benefits. And then we talk about the total compensation package. All right. So again, the employer is looking to go as low as possible. You're trying to go as high as possible. The slight difference with headhunters is that actually a lot of headhunters get paid, their commission is paid actually on how much you earn. The higher your salary, the more their commission is. That's just the way that it goes. Some are not, some actually do flat fees, but a lot are percentage based. And so if anything, it's actually in their best interest to get you as much as possible. So it's not that they're like working for you, but at the same time, if you get a higher salary, they get more commission. That is just flat out the way that it works. And that's the honest truth. Mike, did you want to comment on this?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, great. Corliss, I know this is a whole different world in the government. I mean, because headhunters aren't often used, but is there anything you want to say about salary negotiation?
Yeah, the good thing about the federal government is that the salary is pre-negotiated, meaning there's a range that you're applying to, and you know what the bottom of the range is and you know what the top of the range is. You can negotiate. They will always offer you the bottom of the range. But most people don't know you can negotiate. And I like one of the reasons why I think this is good, especially for older job seekers, is because nobody's looking at your age or level of maturity. They're looking at the skills that you bring to the table. And that's the bottom line. So if you have the skills, they'll pay you. If you don't, they won't. And we all know what the range is, and we don't have to really do a lot of work around that. So.
Got it. Thank you, Corliss. All right, so we actually only have literally a couple minutes, and I know KiKi has a hard stop at 10. So is there maybe a short question that we can address?
I have one for KiKi, I think, that you might want to address, KiKi.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, well, there was one.
Virtual.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there was about virtual
Yes.
Interview tips.
Great.
So virtual interview tips, I'm going to give you one. If you like, there are a ton, but here's a virtual interview tip for you before you get started. Whenever you get ready to go on camera and you're doing a virtual interview, before you go live, and if you are afraid that you're going to forget something when you're talking to somebody, in your virtual interview, do something called bird tailing. Okay, you can put notes around in the background of your computer to remember the key points you want to bring up. That way you're not looking down and getting distracted from the conversation that you're having. We call it bird tailing because you can actually use Post-it notes, and I'm looking around here to see if I have any Post-it notes handy. I do. But you can use Post-it notes, and you actually stick the sticky side on the outside with the key points that you want to remember to bring up. You put them around your computer so you're not looking at the same spot like you're reading from a script the whole time. But what that does is it allows you to look over to make sure that you're hitting those key points, those key skills, or, if there are those things that are going to help you, really hit the mark with that interview that you want to make sure you remember to bring up. Put those around, and it doesn't look like you're reading from a script or that you're disconnected from the interviewer, but that you're actually engaged in the conversation. Because ultimately, the number one thing you want to do is connect human to human so that you're having a real conversation and it's not like some sort of canned presentation.
Thank you, KiKi. And we're actually going to try every time to get at least one of those video tips out of KiKi because she's such an expert in that. Thank you, KiKi. I know you've got to jump off. We appreciate you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
All right, so just want to kind of wrap up here and share with you all our contact information. So if you'd like to reach us, feel free to grab a screenshot of this. And one of us is available for questions. Feel free to link in with us. We are available to help you with your search on any level, whatever you'd like. Also want to give a special thanks to the other job support groups here in the local DC area who have been helping to promote Higher Movement Mastermind, but also they are wonderful groups, also all free, that you can use for your search. and their links are here. They offer weekly events.
Can you go back to the jobs, to your contact page? I just want to take, thanks.
Absolutely.
I want to take a picture of it. Thank you, dear.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
And again, here's the information for the job search groups. And I like to close with an inspirational verse for those who feel inspired by this. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a hope and a future. And that is from the book of Jeremiah. So with that, I would like to wish you all a blessed day. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. And if there are questions that were in the chat that we didn't get to cover today, please feel free to use the Google form. If you go to the Higher Moment Mastermind meetup page, there is a Google form where you can post your questions in advance, and we'll make sure to put those up front, right, to answer them first before we answer other ones. So thanks very much, everyone, and we hope to see you again next week.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. You were wonderful.
God bless. Thanks.
Thank you.